Hello and welcome to Big Friendly Grub. I hope you're doing well, and today I'm going to show you a really lovely tart that I'm going to bake for you today. Yes, I'm going to be making you a classic British tart. It is the Bakewell Tart. I actually asked on Twitter if people wanted to see a Bakewell tart or a chocolate tart, and the Bakewell tart actually won out quite heavily, so people are still interested in the British classics. Bakewell tart is actually a variant of the Bakewell pudding, which originated from the town of Bakewell in Derbyshire. Someone's been on Wikipedia. The Bakewell tart is a really lovely classic British tart. It's got a lovely layer of jam in the bottom. It's usually either raspberry or strawberry. I'm going with raspberry today. And then it's got a really lovely almond frangipane on top. Some people don't like it because of the almond flavour, and sometimes it reminds them of marzipan, and not everyone's fond of it. Personally, I think it's great. It's a really, really classic tart. And I'm going to show you how to make it today, including a sweet shortcrust pastry as well. So we're going the whole hog. So come over here and join me and I'll show you how to make it. So let's get started with our sweet shortcrust pastry. First of all, we're going to need 250 grams of just plain flour. Get that weighed out. Then we're going to need 125 grams of really cold unsalted butter. This is straight out of the fridge, and we're going to need to keep our hands really cold because we're going to be rubbing this into our flour, and you don't want to get the butter too warm so it starts to melt, and our hands are naturally quite warm. This is why I've run it under the tap for a good 10 seconds or so to keep my hands nice and cold. If you don't keep your butter nice and cold, you won't get a nice crumb when you're rubbing in your butter. So what we're just going to do is we're going to just lightly want to rub this butter into the flour, which I've cut into cubes. I'm not pressing on it too hard. I'm literally just squeezing it with my fingertips. It's a bit of a lengthy process because you don't want to be too vigorous with it. You don't want to, like I say, melt your butter. Just want to gradually rub it into the flour. Just take your time with it. It's actually quite therapeutic, I find. If you get to the point where you think your hands are getting too warm, what you can do is grab a knife and start using that to kind of cut through the butter. But I'm just going to keep doing this for now until it gets to a point where I'm fairly happy with it. The overall rule for pastry, or at least shortcrust pastry, is always half fat to flour. So we've got 250 grams of plain flour here and 125 grams of unsalted butter. So we're adhering to the rule. And see, I'm starting to get some chunks of butter, but also getting some finer crumbs of butter. So once we've actually got through this, it's going to resemble like wet sand almost, or breadcrumbs. You could, if you really, really wanted to, do this in a food processor. It would be a lot quicker, and obviously the cold metal of the blades would make sure that you don't melt your butter. But again, like my couple of baking recipes before this, I want to show you how to do it all by hand, so you've got confidence to do it with that before you start using machines and the like, because they do make life easier, they make life quicker. But there's something very, very therapeutic and something very satisfying about having done it all by hand. So we're not too far off now. You can see it's actually starting to resemble breadcrumbs. There's still a few lumps in there which I'm just going to try and get out. So we're almost there, and there's just a few lumps still in there. And because my hands are getting a bit warm now, I'm actually going to start running through the last of this mixture with a knife, because that will allow you to separate out those lumps and again not let the warmth of your hands melt the butter. So I'm just going to cut through them like this, help chop through those lumps of butter and help finish off getting our fine breadcrumb texture. So there we go, we've got a nice breadcrumb texture here, again like clumps of wet sand. There might still be a few lumps in there, but to be honest, they'll come together once we actually start mixing together our pastry properly. So what we'll need next is we're going to need to add 50 grams of icing sugar, because this is a sweet shortcrust. Use icing sugar instead of caster sugar because this is finer and you won't get a grainy dough then. So I'll pop this through my sieve and just going to press this through. Just going to use my hand, press it through, get out all the lumps. There we go. And I'm just going to mix this into our breadcrumby mixture. So next we're going to need 2 egg yolks, and we're going to need to separate out our eggs. So I'm going to try and show you how to do this. It's always a bit hit and miss for me, depends on the egg sometimes. So just tap it on a flat surface, get a crack down there on the middle, and then you just want to be very, very carefully. Have a bowl underneath your egg, and we're just going to pass the egg yolk from side to side while getting rid of our white into the bowl. It's pretty much done it in almost one go. Just do it one more time. That's pretty much all the white out. Just plop that in there and do the same for our other egg. See if I can get 2 for 2. Oh, the egg's not cracked as well this time. What you can also do, if you don't mind getting a little bit messy, is also separate these out by hand. So you kind of pass the yolk from side to side in your hand. Which I've probably got to show you now because I'm a bit worried about this egg yolk. So you just pop the yolk into your hand like that. It's a bit gross, but it's fine, it won't kill you, it's an egg. And then you can make sure you get all your white out into that bowl. I'll use that for something else another time, maybe a meringue or something like that. Wash my hands, because you don't want raw egg on your hands. Although our eggs in the UK are much better than they were. No, much less chance of salmonella, unlike certain other countries I could mention. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my knife again and just start to cut this in to the dough, because at this stage you kind of want to handle your mixture as little as possible. So I'm just going to start cutting this in before I start to bring it together. Then I'm just going to start off with a tablespoon of milk. Maybe you'll need more, maybe you need less. Just add that in. Now I'm going to dive into my hands and start to just slowly bring this together. Again, not handling it too much. Start to squish it together, bring it all together. Still looking quite dry, so we probably will need some more milk. I'm going to have a drizzle more milk, not a lot. Just a little bit. That's feeling a bit better. It's starting to come together now. You're picking up all those stray bits. Once I've picked up all the dough from here, I'll transfer it out of the bowl just onto my work surface. So I've taken my pastry out of my bowl, and I'm just going to use like my fingertips to just try and knead it all together. Try and bring it all into one. Pick up any bits as you go around. See, it's starting to come together. You want it just to become a little bit smoother. It's also going to work some of the gluten that's in this flour. There's not loads because this is plain flour. It's not like bread flour or anything like that. It doesn't have as much gluten in it as some other flours, but it still does have gluten in it because we want that strength to be able to make our dough. But you can see that's starting to come together really nicely now. It's looking really nice and smooth. Picking up all my bits, that's looking pretty good actually. Just gonna give it another tease. There we go, that's looking pretty nice. It's looking quite nice and smooth. So what we're gonna wanna do now is I'm gonna go get something to wrap this in. So I'm just gonna wrap this in some baking parchment because one, it's a bit better for the environment than cling film, and two, if you wrap it into cling film, your pastry can get a little bit sweaty. So I'm just gonna fold this over, and there we go, that's all wrapped up. Notice I've wrapped it into kind of like a circle shape. That's because we are going to be putting it into a flan tin, which is round. The round shape will help us with rolling it into our flan tin when we get to that stage. So this is going into the fridge for 1 to 2 hours.
One eternity later.
So I've got my pastry out of the fridge. It probably had a good 90 minutes to sit and chill and rest. Allow the gluten to relax, allow us to roll this out a bit easier. So what we're going to need to do now is I'm going to take it out of its baking paper. See, it's firmed up quite nicely. We'll make it easier to roll out. So we're going to need to roll it out so it's bigger than our flan dish. So this is about a 10-inch one. So I'm going to need to roll this pastry out so it is bigger than that, because we're going to need it to come up the sides and have a little bit excess. So I'm going to throw down a little bit of flour, not too much, because Again, like with bread, everything's about ratios with baking, so we don't want to have too much flour and having this end up dry. So I'm just going to start to roll this out. I reckon we're probably going to want it about 2 centimeters thickness, but I will see how we go as I get it rolled out. Got my marble rolling pin, heavy duty, nice and heavy, also nice and cold as well, because I don't want to warm up our pastry too much. So you can see I've got the pastry rolled out, and it is a good deal bigger than our flan tin, our tart tin. So now what I'm going to have to try and do is very carefully gently get this up and over the rolling pin. So what I'm going to have to very carefully do is get this up and over on our rolling pin, and then just drape this very carefully over the top. There may be some holes up here, but we can patch those up. Get that in the tin all around the edges, make sure it's all lined properly. This is why you want it larger, so you can get it into all the nooks and get into all those corners as you possibly can. Getting a bit of breakage here, which is unfortunate, but like I said, I'll get that patched up with some of this excess pastry. I just want to get it into all the corners first. Might have rolled it a little bit thinner there than everywhere else. It happens. I am still not a master of this by any means, so I'm actually going to take a bit here where it's actually a bit thicker. Pop some on there just to patch this up. See, we're patching that up quite nicely there. Won't be as even as everywhere else, but the important part is we don't want any real holes or anything in there. So see, we can get that all patched up quite nicely. So that's all in, that's all lined quite nicely. Then what you want to do is you get your rolling pin and then you just roll it across the top. And that allows you to get off all your excess pastry. Then what you want to do next is get a fork and just prick the base all over, because when we bake it, that's going to stop it from puffing up on the bottom. So you can see I've pricked the base all over. And now I'm going to pop that in the fridge for about 15 minutes while we work on our Frangipane. Also got some pastry left over, so I'm going to pop that, wrap it back up in the baking parchment, and then I can use this for something else a bit later, maybe some jam tarts or something like that. Right, for our Frangipane, we are now going to need a large bowl, and we're going to add in 125 grams of room temperature unsalted butter. Again, room temperature, because I can put my finger in it. Chuck that in there. Ooh, almost a little bit too soft, because you can see it's starting to melt a little bit there, but that's okay, we can still make this work. Any more than that and it would probably not be about right. Then I'm going to pop on our scales, and I am going to add in 125 grams of golden caster sugar. There we go, 125 grams of golden caster sugar. Now I'm going to combine this so it becomes light and smooth and creamy and fluffy, much like we did for our Victorious sponge, if you followed me on that video. If not, I highly recommend you go and check that one out if you want to learn how to make a Victoria sponge. Oh, the golden caster sugar just smells amazing. I think wherever I can, I try and use golden caster sugar over regular caster sugar. Depends on what I'm making, but again, I think this is a perfect one for using golden caster sugar. You can see that's starting to come together already, becoming creamier and fluffier. So you can see that is a lot creamier, a lot lighter in colour, and a lot fluffier than it was. That's about right, I think. Next we're going to want to add in our eggs, so 2 eggs, and we're adding them in one at a time. Add one in and combine it in. Make sure it's well mixed into our butter and sugar. Egg number 2 now. And combine that in as well. You'll notice that I remembered to put my eggs in one at a time this time. If you're not sure what I'm on about, go watch the Victoria sponge recipe. So we've got our scale back, and now I'm going to add in our ground almonds. So I've added in 150 grams of ground almonds there, and I'm also going to add in like 2 tablespoons of flour, not masses, just enough to kind of give it a little bit of strength. Then I'm going to also add in half a teaspoon of baking powder, making sure any lumps are out of that. So as I've said before, you never want a lump of baking powder in your food. It's not nice. Then we're going to want to mix this all through. Just going to fold it in, getting it all well combined. So that's looking about right. It's enough that we're going to be able to get it spread into our tart case. I'm also going to add in a teaspoon of almond extract, because even though we've got the ground almonds, this is just going to give it some of that like extra kick of almond. It smells amazing. So that's looking about right. That's what we're going to be able to spread into our tart case. And I'm going to pop that to one side. Oh, it smells amazing. Sorry, I can smell that almond, it's incredible. So yeah, I'm going to pop this to one side while I go get our chilled tart case. So I've got our chilled tart case out of the fridge. Now what we're going to do is add in some jam to our base, because otherwise it's not a Bakewell tart without some nice jam at the bottom. I'm going with raspberry, but you could alternatively use cherry or strawberry. It's really up to you, but I think either raspberry or cherry is a bit more traditional. Strawberry is fine as well, but I'm going with raspberry this time around. Oh, just going to add a bit at first. We don't want a too thick of a layer. Just spread it all around nice and evenly into all the corners. Again, it's all down to preference really. If you do want more jam, add more jam. Personally, I don't want us to overpower it too much. There we go, that's the jam all nicely spread across the bottom. That's just going to give a nice contrast to the sweet Frangipane that we're going to put on top of it, because the raspberry jam is nice and sharp. It'll be a really nice contrast. So I'm going to grab our Frangipane, and I'm just going to dot this over, all over, then we can bring it all together when we smooth it out. Get all of that out of there. You don't want to waste any of it. It's precious, precious nectar. Then we're just going to gently smooth all that out, fill up your case, get to all the edges. You're going to want a nice even layer so it all bakes at the same time. Even if it's not all the way to the top of the case at the moment, it should rise up in the oven because we've got the eggs in there and we've got the baking powder there. So you can see that's all lovely, nice and level, all into all those corners. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to get some flaked almonds, again to enhance the almondy flavour, and also it gives it a nice aesthetic. You don't have to do this, you can just kind of scatter them on or place them on as I'm doing here. I'm going to take a bit of time and care over this. So there we go, I've got the almonds spread all over the top. So now I'm going to get this into the oven. I've preheated the oven to 180 degrees. I think that's about 350 degrees Fahrenheit, about gas mark 4. But again, I will be putting all the temperatures and ingredients into the recipe and into the YouTube description. So let's get this into the oven. So I'm now going to pop our Bakewell into the oven. I've got it on 180 degrees. You can see I've already got a baking sheet in there because we're going to want to pop our Bakewell tart onto that, because we are not blind baking this, we're just putting it in as so onto that baking sheet. We're going to give it 40 to 50 minutes, a good long bake. The reason we're not blind baking this is because we don't really need to, because it's having such a long bake. But popping it onto that baking tray will have that heat and allow that bottom to crisp up much better than if you didn't have it. So we're going to leave that for about 40 minutes. I'll come back and check it and we'll see where it's at. So it's been 40 minutes now. I am now going to go into the oven. Well, I'm not going to get into the oven, but I'm going to check out the oven, see how we've done. I think it's pretty much there, and then we can take a look and then maybe put some icing on it. Let's see, shall we? Oh, there we go. Look at that. That is just about right. It's just about the right shade of golden brown. Looks gorgeous. So what I'm going to do now is I am not going to touch that at all until it has cooled down, and then we can drizzle a little bit of icing over this, and then it'll be pretty much ready. So let's come back in a bit once it's cooled down. Right, this has had a good 15 minutes to cool down. I can touch the tin a little bit better. So now I am just going to add a little bit of icing over the top. This is just lemon icing that I made while it was cooling down. And all it is, it's just literally 5 tablespoons of icing sugar to 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. I'm using the bottled lemon juice because it's absolutely fine for this. You could use fresh lemon if you want to, but I tend not to keep them around too much because I don't use them that often. But this will do fine. And we are just gonna do a bit of a drizzle over this, completely non-professionally. You might be much better at this than I am, but to be honest, decorating's never been my strong point, but we don't want masses and masses of this over here. It's just to accentuate the flavours. So that icing is just going to set on top of the tart, and that's just going to add a little sharpness to it. You don't have to add it, of course, but I decided to. Wish I'd done it a bit neater, but like I said, presentation is not always my best point, but it's going to taste good. So now I'm just going to get the tart out of the tin, and to do that, it's a loose bottom tin, so all I'm going to do is get a glass. It's a dirty one, I'm afraid, but there's no point in using a clean one when I've already got a dirty one out. And then just pop this onto there, into the middle, and there you go. That comes out nicely. Now I'm going to pop it onto this plate. I'm going to keep the tart tin base underneath it for now to give it a bit of stability because it is still warm and I don't want it to crack and break while it's still warm. Look at that, that's come out really well. I'm really, really happy with that. The pastry's come out nicely. I am definitely happy with that. There you go, guys. One Bakewell tart. And boy, it sure did bake well. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to see how it looks inside until tomorrow because I'm taking it to work. Like most things, I tend not to crack into these when I'm at home because I live alone. And to be honest, if I cut into this now, it might not last till tomorrow. So I'm going to have to be patient, and we'll have a look at this tomorrow once I've taken it to work. I'm really, really happy with that. And it really wasn't that complicated. Just takes a bit of time between making the pastry, making the filling. So hopefully you'll be inspired to give it a go. We will see you on the next Big Friendly Grub video. Bye guys.